These are coloring books, and I'm about to tell you that they are gonna change the way you paint your miniatures. Now, I know that you must have all kinds of questions, like how? Why coloring books and not 2D art? Or are you on drugs? And you know what? I will answer these questions. Most of them anyway. But to help us understand what you can take away from this exercise, first, let's look how to not do it. As I'm coloring this wonderful picture by Alphonse Mucha, think about what's wrong here. Just so you know, I have picked one color for the skin tone, one color for the fabric, and yellow for the golden accessories. We are done. Except it doesn't look very good, does it? Okay, but why exactly does this look like an ass and the original is an amazing piece of art? I mean, the artist also used just one color for the fabric and the skin, right? Wrong. You see, coloring books and miniatures have more things in common than you might think. The painting on the coloring books is basically just an outline, but what you do within that outline is totally up to you. Miniatures work the same way. You sort of have this sculpt and it's entirely up to you how you fill it. What makes our results so unimpressive as opposed to the original is this lack of shading, or rather, lack of depth. You can still see what is going on because the outline is there, but without any depth, it's still very boring to look at. On miniatures, you can also achieve a readable result by just using base coats and by shading the recesses. But once more, without properly building depth, it's not gonna look as good. Okay, now let's do it properly. In this case, I am not picking just one color, but multiple ones. It's perfectly legit shading your skin tones with brown or red, but even green or blue can work depending on the context. But let's leave color theory aside for now and focus on depth. The top of her head is shaped like a sphere or a ball, so you can shade it like that. In fact, breaking down everything into simple shapes is very useful when painting. Basically anything can be looked at as some variation of a sphere, a cube, cylinder, or a cone. As I mentioned, the top of her head is like a sphere, but not all of it. For artistic purposes, the forehead could be considered a cylinder. So depending on the light and material, the light reflection will run from the top to the bottom like that. The same is true for the arms. Those are almost perfect cylinders. So the middle of them is the lightest and the curved sides will get darker because there is less light. But of course, this always depends on the light and the material. The most important thing is to realize how shapes work. If the shape is like a sphere, there will be a circular highlight. If the shape is like a cylinder, the reflection will run from one side to the other. And if it's a cube, all sides have different exposure. This breakdown into simple shapes is not always simple. I mean, just look at all the folded fabric. That's a fucking nightmare. But on the other hand, it's a very useful tool before you start painting anything. Like, for example, I wanna paint this armor to look metallic. So where should be the reflections? Easy. Consider this to be in a shape of a cylinder that has a weird curvature. So the main reflection should be stretched from one point to the other. But because it's a reflective metal, I can also place a secondary reflection right here or so. This represents a reflection from the environment, and it happens with very new and reflective materials. Okay, this is all very nice, but how does it exactly apply to miniatures? Simple. You can take these 2D techniques like shading and building depth and apply them to your models. In fact, I do it all the time. Everyone does. Just look at this Kingdom Death miniature. This model is full of all kinds of awesome shapes. If you look at the thighs, those are essentially cylinders at different angles. However, because the cylinder expands at the top, so does the reflection. Even the hair forms this kinda cylindrical shape, so I painted like 2 cylinders next to each other. And I guess you can already tell what kind of shape is this. It's not a cube, let me tell you that. So it makes sense that there is this sort of circular volumetric highlight. And by the way, if you're interested, there is some extra footage of the painting process for this mini on my Patreon. But anyway, I am fully aware that this breakdown has its limits. Like, for example, what kind of shape is this? Or this? Or even this? Well, yes, you can't really say that they look like any of the basic shapes, except they do. Let me explain. While this isn't exactly a sphere, cylinder, or a cube, it's curved like one of them. If you imagine a cylinder that is laying on one of its sides, the reflection is pretty much the same. If you don't believe me, we can simply cut out one portion of it. Ta-da! And this pattern can be found everywhere on any miniature. Yes, you won't find the basic shapes in their pure form, because there will be bumps and curves, but essentially, it's all just a variation. And once you understand that everything is just a variation of these shapes, and you learn how to build depth on them, you'll get results that are way more interesting, whether it's a coloring book or a miniature. But building depth is just one part of the puzzle. There is one other very important concept called readability. And it's essential if you want to improve your miniatures. So if you want to make your miniatures even better, check out this video, because it will be a game changer for you. And see you there!